thank you for staying with us. This is the Conservative Commandos radio show with George Landreth and yours truly, Rick Trader, coming to you from the My Pillow Studios, the My Store Studios of the AUN TV network. And hey, George, our next guest is with us. Very familiar face, voice, and name here on Conservative Commandos. But George, please make that introduction.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to do that because Rick Manning is not only a great guest, he's a friend of yours and mine, and he's a friend of anybody who cares about liberty. And so he is, of course, as you mentioned, he's a Conservative Commandos and AUN TV alumnus, but he's also the president of Americans for Limited Government. What that tells you is that his mindset aligns with our founders because they wrote a constitution with the idea of creating a government that wasn't all powerful but had limited powers. And Rick works hard to make sure that we maintain that. He's also served on President Trump's transition team in his, the first time around, and he's the author with Star Parker of Necessary Noise: How Donald Trump Inflames the Culture War and Why It Is Good for America. So, Rick, we're very glad to have you, and we're very glad that you can come back and join us again on the Conservative Commando. So thanks for making time.
Oh, my pleasure. Always time for you guys. And, the voice right now is probably one of the most important times in the entire Trump administration, because if they don't get off to a good start, they won't get off at all. So we have to launch them right and make sure they're launched in the right direction.
It makes a lot of sense because there's a lot of damage to undo from the last 4 years. And so they got to get rolling quickly. And some of it he can do by, of course, executive order, meaning getting rid of all the executive orders that Biden did, and also reinstituting executive orders that Biden undid. But there's other things that Congress has to act on that he can't just do by executive order, because under our Constitution, the president is not the monarch. And so he can't do everything. And as a result, hopefully with a thin majority in the House and the Senate, they can move forward quickly. And I think you make a good point that it needs to happen fast, partly because there's what I guess you call the honeymoon period. And once that ends, some of the things move more slowly. But also, I would argue, if we want our country to economically move forward, we've got to move quickly, because we've been kind of bogged down. And if we don't make sure that, for example, the tax cuts become permanent, if we don't start reducing the size of government so that the federal deficit continues to explode every 100 days by another $1 trillion, then it doesn't really matter how good a president Donald Trump is. It's going to have a certain lag that's going to exist there. That's going to be a dead weight that even if you're the strongest man on the planet, you're going to get tired from trying to pull it along. So we really need for Congress to do its part. So I wanted to ask you, kind of from your perspective, you kind of know what's going on in Washington, you understand the way it works. Do you feel like we can get some of these things done and get them done quickly? Like the tax, for example, extending tax cuts?
The answer is yes. But it's not just getting them done quickly. We have to get enough done quickly, because unlike a lot of people, I'm skeptical that there'll be more than one bite of the apple in terms of getting something called a Budget Reconciliation Act done. Right now, as we said, you have the Matt Gaetz seat empty in the House. Another congressman from North Carolina who ran for Attorney General in North Carolina and won, announced he's resigning. So Republicans are down to 218 right now, 218 to 215 in the House. It's an almost impossible majority to maintain. And the further you get away from the election, the less power President Trump has. So I would encourage, and I think Speaker Johnson is going to pursue as big of a package up front to try to get done by March. Try to get a major reforms done by March and over to the Senate, because once you get later in the year, it's going to get ugly. And once the Republicans start playing every man for themselves, there won't be any way to put together a majority.
Yeah. One of the things I don't quite understand is I understand why Matt Gaetz is not a member of Congress between the election and January 1st, because he resigned, right? But he won the election.
Correct.
he won re-election in November, and his resignation doesn't seem to me to relate to that. So if I were him, I think I would stick around until it's possible there's a replacement for him, because we need
He
that
chose
vote.
not.
But what's going on there?
Yeah, he chose not to. He sent a letter to the clerk that was read yesterday. Actually, I'm sorry, on the 3rd, and that announced he would not be taking the seat that he won. And the Democrats cheered loudly for that. But it was so that the die is cast in that regard. And his thinking is that it takes a while under Florida state law to actually replace somebody. And the earliest you could have a vote would be April 1. And given that there are other Florida members, House members that were appointed by President Trump to be in his cabinet, and they want to do them all at once and get as many of those seats filled with Republicans as possible, because right now, truth be told, if everybody who was appointed by President Trump, who's in Congress, were to take the seat, were to be confirmed right now, we'd be in a 215 to 215 tie in terms of control of the House.
Yeah, wow, that's a troubling thought.
That's the point. We need to do this stuff fast. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why it's important to move fast while you have the advantage, because all it takes. I lost a vote on trying to repeal semi-auto ban in New Jersey 30 years ago, because one of the people who was one of my votes, I had no votes to spare. One of my votes in the assembly, the assembly person ended up with Lyme disease and was in the hospital, and she couldn't show up, so I couldn't vote. And when I had the votes in the Senate, and as a result, it was that vote got delayed, and it got delayed a couple of months until she was healthy. And I had all my votes there in the House, so we voted it. And then I didn't have all the votes in the Senate because one of the people decided they're going to vote differently. So it was the fact is, you got to vote when you have the votes, and when you've got a narrow margin, it's really, really hard to keep 215, 216, 217 politicians rounded up and making sure none of them is out of town, none of them is ill, none of them's in the hospital. There's a lot of things that happen in life, and the type of things that happen, normal things that happen in life for all of us, when it happens to members of Congress, when there's no margin for error, becomes disastrous for the country. So you got to move fast while the votes are there. Otherwise, you may not get another opportunity.
Yeah, that makes a good point. I wanted to ask you about the Department of Government Efficiency. It's not technically a true department in the sense that it doesn't have an office building and it doesn't have a budget. It's essentially I'd say maybe more accurately, we could call it a commission designed to promote government efficiency. And it's a presidential commission that Donald Trump has authorized, and that thankfully someone like Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have agreed to work on. I wanted to ask you, what do you think comes of all of that? Is that the sort of, because I would argue that there's a ton of people in Washington, and some of them have ours by their name, and they don't seem that interested in shrinking the size of government. And since you run an organization called, the idea of Americans for Limited Government, you probably have a good sense of who the allies are and who they aren't. So what do you think? When you have a 3-seat majority, do you think we can actually start cutting government, or is that something that people are going to choke on and say, no, you can't do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's why moving fast is important again. The momentum for cutting government is now. You can sit there, and a lot of people in Washington, D.C., as you guys know, kind of scoff at the Department of Government Efficiency because it's not a department. It's got no power. The only power it has is the ability of Elon Musk to generate media around stuff. But you know what? It's the most powerful entity in my lifetime for limiting government. It's the most powerful entity in my lifetime that has real resources and the ability to drive message broadly. Truthfully, billionaires aren't interested in limiting government by and large, and Elon Musk is the exception to that, and he's putting his money where his mouth is. So yeah, it's a huge opportunity because Elon Musk and has the capacity to hold members of Congress accountable when they don't do what they said they wanted to do on when they're running for office. And the question will be is, will the Department of Government Efficiency have enough actual real doable proposals that you get fundamental transformation? And I would argue that fundamental transformation is not really about whether you strip a $100,000 grant from the AFL-CIO. Fundamental transformation is whether you eliminate 25-30% of the federal employees permanently. A fundamental transformation is if you create an environment where you can fire people who won't do their jobs. That's fundamental transformation. Fundamental transformation is when you sit there and you put a real sequester on spending that makes it so so budgets are the belts are tightened, and Congress has to act within a parameter of limited spending priorities, of actually picking spending priorities. But the truth of the matter is, our budget deficit from a balanced budget perspective is about 70% of our spending is Social Security, food stamps, Medicare, and that kind of program that Congress doesn't vote on the appropriation for. And that's about 70% of our spending, and it's about $2 trillion of our budget deficit. So when you look at it, if you cut every single dollar that Congress decides to spend and eliminate every one of them, including the entire Department of Defense, you still run a budget deficit in our country. That's just that's the numbers. So yes, we need to have some efficiency. Yes, hopefully, my biggest hope out of the Elon Musk project is that he looks at it and finds very efficient ways to do the things that currently government's doing very inefficiently, cutting the cost of doing those services dramatically. But the fact of the matter is, we have overpromised what government can deliver, and for the amount that Americans are willing to pay to get it. And those are irreconcilable differences that eventually have to be resolved. Otherwise, we will continue to sink into a debt hole that is insurmountable, and assuming it's not insurmountable now.
Yeah.
I'm a bummer today. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
We won. We have great hope. There's promise of getting stuff done. I'm happy. I really am happy.
Yeah.
I just got done. Unfortunately, I just got done shoveling snow for 2 hours, so my back hurts and I'm grumpy. Okay.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I did the same thing. So yeah, absolutely. But I do think that one of the interesting things about this situation is that it's not just enough for the federal government to say stop wasting money. It also has to kind of just stop trying to do all the stuff it's doing, because it basically, for example, wants to tell you how to raise your children. It wants to tell you how to run your business. It wants to tell you all kinds of stuff. I'm waiting for the day when someone says, we need a Department of Style that will tell us what to wear in the mornings to look cool and to look
That's
hip.
called Hollywood.
Huh? I'm joking, of course, but that's the point, is government's getting into crazy, if you will, stuff that is none of their business. And we got to get them out of that crap.
Well, very true. And speaking of kind of that area, the Department of Education had a regulation that was going to impose transgenderism on schools across the country, and they pulled it about a week ago. And everybody said, "Oh, Biden's pulled this regulation," and the fact is, that's not a good thing. He pulled the regulation because if Congress had said, no, this regulation is out of line through the Congressional Review Act, if they had that would have killed that regulation forever, unless Congress actually voted to reinstate it. They pulled it because they want to reinstate it next time they take power. And so a lot of these victories that are being reported in some of the media without context, they don't understand the reason they're pulling some of these most controversial measures is because they know Congress will vote them down, and that takes away the administrative state's capacity to reinstate them later. And so Biden is playing three-dimensional chess here at the end to ensure that the options are still open to do all the crazy stuff they've been trying to do, and that the Trump administration and Congress in particular cannot permanently stop them from doing it.
Yeah, you're right. They're trying to make sure that the crazy leftist policies of the last 4 years can either be set in stone or recreated later. Good point. Very good point. That's a good place for us to take a quick break. Folks, don't go away because the Conservative Commandos with Rick Trader and George Landreth and our special guest, Rick Manning, the president of Americans for Limited Government, will be right back.
You're still looking good.
I'm still feeling good. You know, I've got all your MyPillow products. Mattress topper, bed sheets, My Pillows, towels, slippers, blankets, sleepwear, dog
Whoa, Charles. Everyone now can get MyPillow products at huge discounts at MyPillow.com. That's right. Now's the time to go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of our 3-in-1 sale. We're bringing you exciting new products, overstock specials, and closeout deals you won't find anywhere else. For example, when you buy one of our brand new MyPillow 2.0s, you get another one absolutely free. And with our overstock sale, you save 50% on our luxurious Giza Dream bed sheets. That's as low as $29.99 for the best sheets ever. And with our biggest closeout special, you get our all-season slippers for only $35. Or our sandals and slides for just $25. Quantities are limited, and once they're gone, they're gone.
To order, please call 800-797-7893 and use the promotion code AUNTV, that's 800-797-7893, and AUNTV, again, that's 800-797-7893, and AUNTV.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Conservative Commandos radio show with Rick Manning, George Landreth, and yours truly, Rick Trader, coming to you from the MyPillow studios, the MyStore studios of the AUNTV network. And as I mentioned, Rick Manning is our guest. He's a president for Americans for Limited Government. He's also a part-time host here on the Conservative Commandos radio show. Always love having Rick join us. And hey, Rick, thank you for holding through that break. We appreciate your time. And I'm going to pick up where you and George left off. Some crazy leftist ideas and plans that Joe Biden is dropping in the very last days of his administration. And one just come down recently. Joe Biden is making a sweeping move to ban all further offshore oil and gas drilling on the East Coast, the West Coast, the Gulf of Mexico, and Alaska's North Bering Sea. Now, the problem is, if Donald Trump wanted to reverse these bans, because Biden used something called the Outer Continental Shelf Land Act, it was written as a presidential action under its authority is permanent. So he knows the day that Donald Trump takes office on the 21st, Donald Trump promised drill, baby, drill. And here Biden is doing whatever he can to stop him. I want to get your reaction to this, Rick. And what do you think Donald Trump could do?
Well, first thing is the Justice Department needs to sue the Biden administration to negate the action. You know, actually, it's kind of disturbing that a president going out who's been thoroughly rejected could then, with a stroke of a pen, do permanent damage to his opponents, is the winner, what the people wanted, through a stroke of a pen. And then there's something unsettling about that. So there'll be a legal fight about it. Secondly, if Congress says no, that's not the way it's going to go, you have the capacity to rescind some of that action simply by changing the law.
Well, that's the sticky wicket, Rick. Changing the law. As you say, right now there's such a very thin Republican majority in the House, just a couple of votes. That's what, and you know, the Republicans, I think that they are their own worst enemy in trying to fight each other. It's like they're going to lose this war. They're going to lose this war on a theory that they can't accept 80% of a win. To some Republicans, it's got to be 100% or nothing. They do things like try to stop the House from reelecting Speaker Johnson. Rick, that's what's got me concerned. Republicans working together.
Well, that's always the problem. And, it's the best way to think about it is Republicans are individualists. We all, Republicans come in, they have their own set of ideas. Each of them want to do a certain set of things, and those things aren't necessarily congruent with one another. The Democrats are a Borg. The Democrats all have their socialists/communists at their core, and as a result, they will sacrifice individual Borg members in order to get what they consider to be the greater good done.
Mm-hmm.
The Republicans, on the other hand, never seem to be able to clench a fist. And you can't win in politics unless you can clench a fist. And right now, if you end up with a number, 10 Republicans, 3 Republicans going off and going their own direction, you don't have a fist. You have a bunch of fingers poking at you. And while you can poke somebody's eye out that way, you don't deliver a mortal blow. So it's a problem. It's probably the biggest problem facing the Republican conference and Mike Johnson. It's why we couldn't afford to have a month-long speaker fight, wasting the first month of the Trump presidency trying to figure out who's on first. It's why Johnson had to be picked as speaker. And it's why Johnson now has the hardest job in America, harder than President Trump's, because he's got to corral 218 Republicans when he can't swing and miss on a single one. And truthfully, there are a lot of them who flat out will never vote for things like a continuing resolution, no matter what. And if you won't vote for it, you don't get to complain about what's in it. And so it's going to be a real lesson in governance. And Mike Johnson's got the hardest job in Washington, D.C. And quite honestly, I'm surprised he wanted it.
Well, and Rick, between you and I in the lamppost, I think the job has been made harder. Why? Because Donald Trump picked 3 Republican members of Congress to become part of his administration. I think he could have made not that those were not good choices, but realizing the problem, he could have made other choices. Or how about this idea, Rick? How about this idea? There are 10 Democrats in the House that are representing Trump districts. You go to each one of those 10 members and say, I want to make you an ambassador. Pick your country, pick the country you want to go to, because you're going to be our next ambassador to wherever you want to. Rick, what do you think about that? And then let's have a special election and potentially a Republican can win that seat. I'm serious about this, Rick. They're all social climbers. They would all, they may be a congressman now, but the idea of being an ambassador, wow, 4-year vacation, paid at that.
Well, I'll tell you, I've got a friend who was an ambassador, and he became, almost bankrupted him. But it's because you have a lot of duties you have to do, and if you're not extremely wealthy, it runs you out of money. But nonetheless, I like the idea if the Democrats would do it. It's picking off some of theirs and sending them off to places around the world, and really nice places around the world. If they,
take your pick. Take your pick for your vacation.
Unfortunately, as Trump learned in the first term, you probably want to make certain that you have some decent ambassadors in Europe, because if you don't ever get around to, for instance, appointing an ambassador to Ukraine, and you leave the foreign service person there who's doing Biden's business, and you then have the entire thing turn into an impeachment against you, perhaps you need to pick your ambassadors a little bit carefully in some of those areas.
Yes, they serve at the president's. Pleasure of the president is the word I wanted to use. Yeah, they serve at the pleasure of the president. They can be fired at any time. And I don't know. Seems to me what ambassadors do is rub elbows with the princess and prime ministers.
Yeah, if it were me, I would have picked somebody who was a leftist to go be the ambassador to Great Britain. Why? they've hired, basically Great Britain's prime minister's crazy, communist. So you might as well, they get along famously, and the person wouldn't be doing it, wouldn't have anything to do with what our actual foreign policy was. They just go over there and have parties. So that would be, one place you could send them. As far as I'm concerned, we could eliminate all of NATO in toto. So, so having an ambassador to the EU, who cares? It's there's certain places in the world that matter, and there's certain places that don't. Obviously, the EU kind of is with NATO. We got kind of trapped into a Ukraine situation, which you can agree being there, not agree. Bottom line is, we've spent the last 10 years with our entire foreign policy being wrapped around NATO and the Palestinian Authority and Iran. And I have really tried to figure out how Ukraine and the Palestinian Authority should be the centerpieces of our foreign policy, but I can't figure that out. I'm apparently not smart enough. But that's what's happened for the last 10 years. A country nobody could have. The only thing anybody used to know about Ukraine was it was the biggest country in Europe in risk, and if you took Ukraine, it was impossible to defend. So it's a kind of in the game of Risk, it was clearly defined as being basically nothing more, nothing less than a racetrack between Russia and Germany. So all in all, it's the centerpiece of our foreign policy for the last 4 years and almost for the past 10 years. Your idea is good. I think if the Democrats will take it, we should appoint them to whatever they want and get them out of there. And he should have. And quite honestly, the disturbing part is I don't know if the Trump team that was choosing the right people to be in the Trump administration were focused on what the actual votes in the House were, and may have been unaware of that. And that shows a unique blindness to the fact that Congress matters too.
Rick, I also want to talk about the power of Donald Trump, and he's not even been sworn in yet. And where I'm going with is he said to Canada, come on, become part of the United States. We'll make him the governor. Problem being, Trudeau is gone now. I want you to comment on that, but I also want you to comment on something else Donald Trump said. He said to Greenland, become a part of the United States. Now, Greenland's prime minister has said they want to be independent from Denmark now. I mean, with the influence that Donald Trump is having, he's not even sworn in yet. Here you got a prime minister in Canada who has resigned. Prime Minister of Greenland is now saying they want to be independent from Denmark so they can have a closer tie to the United States.
Yeah, it's Donald Trump sends shockwaves around the world because he says things that nobody else is. Other people might be thinking, but they don't say it. Greenland is people think, kind of scoff because Greenland is this massive land that looks really big and isn't
largest island in the world.
Right. But it's part of the North American continent. And it was, Eric the Red was there and all these historical Danish figures were there. But the fact of the matter is, Greenland is an extremely important geopolitical location. Plus, they've got a lot of rare earth minerals on Greenland. China has invested a lot of resources into creating naval ports in Greenland, and a company that looks like it's an Australian company when you look at it is I think it's an Australian mining company, but its board of directors are all Chinese communist members in Beijing, and it's and they're harvesting the rare earth metals. The harvesting of the rare earth metals has two effects. Number one, China is controlling the rare earth metals around the world. But most importantly, they're running ships in and out of Greenland to transport those, creating a port. And a port that could be used not just for transporting metals, but could be used for naval facilities in the North Atlantic between America and Europe. And it is dangerous, the current situation that the Danish government has allowed to occur by allowing the Chinese to control land and control ground and control a port in Greenland. That's what this is about. It's not about some gee whiz, it's an island and wouldn't it be nice to expand America. It's about our geopolitical interests. And Greenland is right there in the middle of the North Atlantic. And the Chinese cannot have a base in the middle of the North Atlantic under any circumstances. I don't care if the Danish government has to kick them out or we have to kick them out, but somebody's got to kick them out.
Well, speaking of getting kicked out or kicking themselves out, Trudeau is gone. He's resigning as the head of his party, which means he'll no longer be prime minister. And I wanted to get your reaction to the end of the Trudeau regime in Canada.
I was kind of shocked, truthfully. I thought that he had more staying power than that. It's stunning to me that the Canadian far left party has essentially is in disarray. They've been in charge for like 10 years, and it appears that there'll be an election, and the Canadian Conservative Party has a huge chance of taking back over. And from what I understand, I'm not an expert on Canadian politics, but the woman who is the head of the Canadian Tory Party is very Trump-like in her demeanor and in her thought process, and would make for a much stronger alliance between America and Canada, an alliance which has fallen on hard times during the Biden administration, as Canada has become a useful tool for China, both for importing illegal Chinese immigrants, but also for getting around various tariff laws that we have related to Chinese goods, which come into Canada and then get stamped from Canada and shipped into America as if they're Canadian-made goods. So that alliance, that North-South alliance we've had with Canada it's been pretty good since about 1814. It's been in disrepair, and hopefully Trudeau's going away will help us reestablish that North America powerhouse alliance, because the Canadians are important to us and we are important to the Canadians. And it's not just a big brother, little brother relationship. Canada controls the northern half of our entire border. And it's extremely important that Canada be diligent in terms of their own border security in order to make sure that America can focus on the southern border and not have similar concerns of criminals and people with bad intent and terrorists coming across, and foreign invaders for that matter, coming across the northern border, which is far longer and more difficult to deal with than the southern border.
Hey, Rick, do you believe that it was his actions during the pandemic that was the start of the downfall of Pierre Trudeau, especially the way he handled the truckers?
I hope so. But it's. But let's just be clear. The Trudeau family legacy has been one of being extraordinarily far left, and then flaming out after becoming kind of super rock stars on the international stage because of their looks and kind of cavalier demeanor. But it's the bottom line that is the fall of the Trudeau administration before Donald Trump ever even takes office, because he was mocking them and making fun of him and basically treating him like a little kid and kicking him around. That's pretty stunning. It's a big deal. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it's been given much too little thought. We have to reestablish our relationships with Canada. It's probably the most important international relationship we have, because we are in the same boat. We're the two major geographic areas in the North American continent. We share a massive border, and the health of America and health of Canada are tied together. And we cannot afford to have a far left communist Canada that is going off the rails and effectively being an enemy, economic and otherwise, of the United States. That is not sustainable. And the rise of Donald Trump and his election changed the political dynamic in Canada sufficiently that Trudeau felt he needed to get out before they threw him out.
Yeah. Can you say Pierre Poilievre? I can. Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government. Rick, we always love having you here with us on the Conservative Commandos, but then again, you know that, Rick. But please tell our audience how they could follow you and read the things you write and also find out more about Americans for Limited Government.
Yeah, go to dailytorch.com. It's a website, lots of websites out there. But if you go there, you'll get unique opinions. You'll get some information on a wide variety of subjects. We try to find things to talk about that aren't just the rewrite of whatever's on the local Newsmax or whatever. We try to find real issues that matter to you on a day-to-day basis that nobody's talking about, because that's where you win. Those are the battles for democracy. It's not the ones that are where you got this big weird kind of everybody's focused on it as a little kind of a shiny object. The way we win this country back, the way we win constitutional governments back, is by taking the small hard issues and winning them. And step by step, we didn't get to where we are with one fell swoop. There's a lot of steps, and we have to rebuild the stepping stones for constitutional governance, and that's what we're working on. And that's what we dedicate ourselves every single day.
Website, Rick.
It's dailytorch.com. Dailytorch.com.
Rick Manning, Americans for Limited Government. Again, Rick, thank you so much for joining us. Take care. God bless. And hey, watch all that snow shoveling out there, buddy. You know, really old guys like you and George Landreth and Rick Trader, I don't know about snow shoveling.
I have to tell you, when I saw it, I said, "Oh boy, this is gonna be fun." My 30-year-old self was jumping up and down for joy, and my back isn't 30 anymore, and it's now jumping up and down and saying in a different emotion. So we will get by. We will survive this snow shoveling disaster of January of 2025. Certainly, I hope the snow shoveling isn't the biggest news. I hope the biggest news is Donald Trump's going to be president, and there's not a darn thing they can do about it.
Hey, Rick, you know what the solution for that is? A nice long soak in a hot tub. I'm serious about this, Rick. Take my advice.
I'm on board, and I will tell you, and within 2 minutes of my being off of this air, I will be heading upstairs and drawing that bath with a little jacuzzi jets and seeing if I have the ability to actually get into it. We'll find out.
Well, excuse me if I don't want to. Excuse me if I don't want to image that, but that's.
Oh no,
that's
totally
something I don't want to do.
Rick
Manning, take care and God bless.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And you are listening to and watching the Conservative Commandos with George Landreth. I'm Rick Trader. Go nowhere, George, and I'll be back with more news and commentary right after this break.